We've got cults, resurrections, cryptids, cannibals, and creepy old people. Sounds like another edition of Indie Horrors on Low Budget Binge. Let's start binging. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Cold Blows the Wind is new on demand from Lionheart Distribution. It's directed and written by Eric Willeford. A couple, played by Vistoria Vertuga and Danelle Leyva, accidentally hit a jogger while on vacation and attempt to cover it up by burying the body in the middle of a forest. But little do they know, anything buried on that land doesn't stay dead long. Cold Blows the Wind has a familiar Pet Sematary-like vibe, but is able to communicate those big ideas with a compacted and smaller scale story. And that's something a lot of low-budget films don't get right. Often they reach outside of the range of the filmmaker's budget and abilities, but filmmaker Eric Willeford is able to wrangle in a lot of good atmosphere and fun concepts into a smaller scale thriller. I think this film would have made an awesome installment of Creepshow or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but the concept is stretched a bit, especially in the middle portion where the couple are separated and they both experience weird things apart from each other. The film picks up towards the end, but I felt that since we were told about the curse that plagues the land the couple buried the corpse in, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. Still, the ending has a few shocks up its sleeve. Specifically, there's a scene involving some poo that I wish I could unsee. I feel some of the acting is not ready for prime time, especially in the parts reliant on heavy drama. Still, the people are pretty and make up for the acting stumbles with some nudity, which is always a welcome surprise as modern American cinema seems to have gone Puritan in terms of showing the nude form these days. While the concept is strong but familiar, the pacing and acting issues do bog Cold Blows the Wind. I am interested in seeing what this filmmaker has coming up next as he shows how to stretch a budget and make it work, so I'm going to give this one a mild recommendation. Loop Track is new streaming on Screambox and Tubi from Dark Sky Films. It's directed and written by Thomas Sainsbury. Thomas Sainsbury plays Ian, a man trying to get away from everything that gives him anxiety, which is pretty much everything. Wanting to see nature alone, he tries his best to avoid contact with other hikers along this New Zealand loop track through the wilderness, but a friendly hiker named Nick, played by Hayden J. Wheel, refuses to take a hint and walks along with him the entire way. Soon the two pair up with another couple, Monica and Austin, played by Kate Simmons and Tawanda Manyibo, and this secluded yet quiet hike becomes anything but. But that's not all that's trouncing through the woods. Ian begins seeing some kind of creature lurking in the shadows, and though the group begin to suspect that Ian is a sick man experiencing hallucinations, they soon find that the danger in the wilderness is very real. After watching the trailer for Loop Track, I was thinking this film would be a prime candidate for my semi-regular Bigfoot Toes of Terror review series. But after seeing the film, I realized that the creature that may or may not be following the hikers is not Bigfoot or a Yowie, as this takes place in New Zealand. Still, I won't spoil what that monster is in Loop Track. It's something you'll have to find out for yourself, or from some other reviewer who's a bit more generous with spoilers. What I will say is that the acting in Loop Track is on point all the way through. This is a bleak film following an unreliable protagonist in the jittery Ian. While I found myself not liking Ian at all and hoping he would succumb to whatever was following the hikers in the woods, I have to admit that even though I didn't like the main character, Thomas Sainsbury does a great job of playing an unlikable lead. Sainsbury also wrote and directed the film, and does a great job of keeping whether there is or isn't something in the woods secret for an extraordinarily amount of time, which kept my interest despite my dislike of the lead. I do think that while there are major hints throughout the film, the answer to whether the monster is real or just in Ian's head is held back a bit longer than it should have been. Most likely, this was done because of a lack of budget. When they do tip their hat and give the big reveal, I was impressed that Loop Track was able to accomplish so much with very little in the effects department.
One of the things that bothered me all the way through Loop Track is why Ian decided to go on this hike, since it's obvious by his constant panting and sweating that Ian isn't a very good hiker and most likely has never hiked at all. While the film does a masterful job in showing Ian's anxiety, lack of social skills, cowardice, and rampant imagination, the reason why Ian is plagued with all of this is left off screen. Through the film's runtime, I felt that a few important pieces of information, namely the reason Ian is hiking and why he acts the way he acts, were left out, which is another reason Ian is such a hard character to connect with. That said, there's a wonderful lo-fi Predator vibe going on throughout Loop Track. I wasn't disappointed in the reveal when the bodies start falling, but it took its sweet time to get there. And despite the fact that I kind of loathed the lead, the mystery kept me invested, and I think it will do the same for you if you give Loop Track a whirl. Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, is available streaming on Freevee and Amazon Prime from Red Hound Entertainment. It's directed by Adrian Langley and written by Colin Casagrande and Adrian Langley. A suspicious quartet of city youths hit a deer on the road and seek help, putting them on the doorstep of a pair of hillbillies who like their folk music and racism as much as they like their cannibalism and torture. The quartet of not-so-innocents find themselves fighting for their lives in the thick forests of rural America. I really liked Butcher's Book 1. It was a no-frills hillbilly cannibal killer family flick that delivered high doses of grisly kills, constant action, and all sorts of twists and turns. When I heard there would be a sequel and maybe more Butcher movies after that, I was thrilled, as I feel writer-director Adrian Langley was able to convey what made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Wrong Turn series so much fun with Book 1. Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, delivers a lot of the same, and while the group of kids in peril are criminals and not just kids who are cheating on one another, with one another, they pretty much run the same kind of gauntlet the first group of kids do. More of the same is good, especially if the original was good, but, and here's the big but, the main problem with Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, is that there really isn't much more done with the concept. For a sequel to be successful, it doesn't necessarily always have to be bigger than the first, as many believe. I think continuing the story and upping the stakes a skosh works. Now, it seems there really isn't a lot of budget here. The bulk of the movie relies on story, acting, and script, with a sizable portion of the money going towards blood and gore effects. But what Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, fails to do is come up with a different story or even evolve the story a bit to keep things interesting. From what I can glean between these two films, the first one takes place in 1998, while the second one is set in the modern day, though there is no real indication as to what era this second movie is in. Other than that, it just seems like this is another story about another pair of evil hillbilly cannibal killer brothers hunting down, killing, and eating a group of kids in the backwoods. Both films rely on action, suspense, and some out-of-the-box twists, but aside from Michael Swatton playing a hillbilly killer cannibal in the first movie, and then playing a completely different hillbilly killer cannibal in Book 2, this might as well be called anything but a sequel. Yes, the trip the story takes is a bit different, but all of the details are almost exactly the same. There's some solid gore and a specific torture scene that's going to make the guys in the audience cross their legs tightly in Butcher's Book 2. The raghorn in the title refers to the deer that the group hits in the beginning, which sets this horror show in motion. Swatton, who delivered the amazing "Get her" line in the first one, devolves into a bald, hulking monster in this one, and because so, the performance is much less of a standout. The other brother, Nick Biskupek, who plays Clyde, delivers a much less dynamic performance as Simon Phillips expertly and eloquently did in the first one as the smarter of the two brothers. Niskupek isn't bad, but he just reminds me of W.E., that annoying literature-quoting Sawyer brother from Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, and I hate that character with such a goddamn passion. The kids are decent as fodder for these monsters to plow through, with the red curly-mopped cutie Holly Kennedy being a true standout of the group. She's a spunky little actress who I'd love to see more of. And yes, there's a modern twist that makes Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, very, very modern, but I don't want to reveal one of this movie's bigger twists. Still, I can see this twist actually being a twist problematic to certain circles. Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn, left me wondering why the filmmaker chose to make this movie at all. A sequel that, by the way the title reads, should continue the story from Book 1, but ends up failing to deliver on that promise. It confuses me why the director, writer Langley, along with his co-writer Colin Casagrande, would go this route and not really edge the story forward a bit, or connect them in any way. Am I to understand that these Butcher's books are all going to be the same, with a group of hillbilly killers hunting down kids in every installment? Even the most repetition of horror franchises try to at least give the illusion of change, but if these two films are any indication, the Butcher's series really gives no shits about all of that. If all you want is more hillbillies, gore, carnage, and chases around the woods, Butcher's Book 2, Raghorn delivers that. Personally, I hope if there is a Book 3, some kind of point to all of this madness is to come. This one simply washes, rinses, and repeats the same concepts again. Still, it's better than 80% of the slashers out there today. Let's wrap up with Amelia's Children. It's streaming on Hulu, and it's directed and written by Gabriel Abrantes. Ed, played by Carloto Cota, has always felt a hole in his life not knowing who his birth parents were. But after his girlfriend Riley, played by I Saw the TV Glow's Bridget Lundy Payne, gets him an ancestry test, Ed discovers that he was abducted as a child and has a long-lost family in Portugal. So Ed and Riley head to a small villa in the middle of the forest in Portugal to meet his twin brother Manuel, also played by Cota, and his mother Amelia, played by Annabella Moreira. But the longer Ed and Riley stay with the family, the more Ed becomes enamored with them, and the more Riley becomes freaked out by their strange ways, like how Manuel and Amelia sleep in the same bed. It comes to be that their sleeping habits are not the strangest secrets this family holds. Amelia's Children is a wonderfully perverse little movie, sporting a modest budget and some truly horrifying uncomfortable moments of familial creepiness. While I won't reveal them here, there are some moments in this movie that will truly make your toes curl, as this family is close, very close, and desperately wants Ed to join in on the fun. This is definitely going to be too much for some to take, but I found it refreshing to see that there still are perverse places of horror to go after all these years. Adding to the creep factor is the way the aged matriarch Amelia looks. Seems she's very fond of plastic surgeries and has undergone quite a few of them through the years to stay young, leaving her with a face that is stretched in some places, puffied in others. This is a truly horrifying prosthetic Annabella Moreira wears, making Amelia look iconic and otherworldly. The sad thing is, there really are actresses out there who have done this to their faces, many of them gorgeous women who could have aged gracefully, but instead go this Frankenstein route. Moreira is a true standout in this all-important and altogether ooky title role, giving the character much depth past the bad plastic surgery, slow and stiff movements, and unblinking eyes. Bridget Lundy Payne as Riley is another great performance, as she seems to be the only one who is looking at this bizarre situation realistically, while the role of the hysterical woman who isn't taken seriously by anyone is a cliché in modern horror. Amelia's Children at least places the horror onto Ed and has Riley simply trying to slap some reality into him rather than suffering all the horror herself. As Manuel, Carloto Cota does a top-drawer job of making him seem overly friendly at first and truly taboo-breaking and wretched by the end. The way he dances in a late scene in the movie is reminiscent of that Jean-Claude Van Damme dancing meme, but Cota pulls it off, making it even more creepy than JCVD could, if that's possible. Unfortunately, Cota as Ed is less effective, more of a pushover, and easily manipulated, making him a character you can't help but disrespect and not care for. Ed's oblivious nature to the strangeness going on is the chink in this film's acting armor. The actor Cota is fine and has an Oscar Isaac feel to his look and cool delivery, but the Ed character feels underdeveloped. There is a plot hole that is never addressed where Ed is encouraged to sign a document written in Portuguese that he has no idea of its contents. The story beat is brought up once and forgotten later on down the line, but Amelia's Children does culminate in a truly strange, bloody, and icky little ending that makes up for this fumble. While it isn't perfect, I found Amelia's Children to be a nightmarishly fun and wickedly wrong little number. If you look to horror for unease and discomfort, reminiscent of the creepy old vibe conveyed in Ty West's X, then this weird little movie is going to be just your kind of sickness. Well, there's 5 indie movies for you. Have you seen any of these? Are you going to? Let me know down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside